wonderful filmmaker whose short films have been selected in over 100 international film festivals. Her debut feature, Huesera, which we just recently saw, blew our minds, premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival last year, where it won Best New Narrative Director and the Nora Ephron Awards. Oh, I miss her.
Hi, Michelle.
It's currently available on all VOD platforms. I want everyone to watch this. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. I want everyone to watch this. So what we'll do, Michelle, and I'm sure you've been in this position before, we'll talk about it in a broad sense, and then perhaps in the last 10 minutes, because we have a lot of questions about.
We want to talk.
Yeah, we want to talk about the spoilers. So we'll have everyone. If you haven't seen it yet, we'll have everyone we'll tell them to pause, what have you, when we get into some of the specifics here. And you're currently got a lot of projects going on. I heard you discuss some of them in a podcast. One of them's a feature adaptation of a short story, but there is something punk-themed, I believe, coming up. And I know you have a big background in punk, some of which we see in this film. If you can expand a little bit on that. I heard you talk about it in one podcast. By the way, welcome.
Of course. Thank you, guys. This is great. I'm very happy to be here with you, and I love that you like Huesera.
We loved it.
Thank you. Well, I am actually, yes, in several projects at the moment, which it's a little bit stressful as well. I'm about to film my next feature here in Mexico by the end of the year. And then I have other ones aligned. There's nothing really like literally on punk, but most of them have like a punk heart, I guess, if that makes sense. And yes, it had to do with the fact that I grew up in the punk scene here in Mexico City. I played in many bands. I was a singer and also guitar. So yeah, not anymore because cinema is very jealous and it doesn't really let me more time to play in bands and have that other compromise. But I still play at home every time I have the chance.
Well, I love it. And also, like, Valeria's, pardon me in advance for all my horrible pronunciations, has sort of a punk background in this film.
Yes, exactly. I mean, Huesera is really very personal in many ways. I always, as a filmmaker, don't want to make a film very autobiographical or something like that, but I ended up bringing so much of my personal life to the character. I wanted to portray different worlds that I know or that I've been part of here in Mexico City. So yes, that's something that I kind of gave to her in a sense of caring for my character, like as a loving blanket, a world that she could go back to and reconnect with other areas of herself. And it was very fun because most of the people like that are in the punk scenes, for example, are close friends of mine that I played with in bands. So it was very special.
That's badass. Well, and so much so, I know it was your friend's apartment, but you lived there for a while. Her home, you actually lived in, and that particular balcony, and this ain't much of a spoiler right here, because we're speaking broadly for now, that scary, scary balcony in it was the same one that you were scared of when you lived there, correct?
Yes, that's wild. That's wild because I lived in that apartment like 10 years ago or something like that. And it was only like for 6 months because I'm friends with the producer and she let me live there when I was struggling with rent and all that. And it's not only the balcony, it's the whole apartment. Honestly, I'm not a very even though I do horror films, it's not that I really believe in ghosts or like there's nothing that I can say that really has happened to me. But that apartment did have certain energies and weird noises that creeped me out a lot. Yes, and that balcony is really, it has something weird, and I would always never go there.
Yeah.
What is it about balconies overall? I'm obsessed with balconies in New York.
Well, people keep falling off or jumping off of them. So that, I think, tends to be where the scary part lies.
I suppose there's that. But even if they're just in the middle of the day, I'm obsessed with New York balconies because, as you can imagine, there are not many of them. And they're usually like in buildings that were of the Gilded Age or perhaps early 20th century. They're beautiful. They are never used, probably for safety reasons, but they're horrifying looking. And I guess it's partly that. But I mean, is it just that particular balcony, or do you have an affinity or fear of them overall?
You don't like heights?
Well, no, you know what? I think the other thing that balcony has is that as cinema. Like it has this access to being at peeping tom.
Yes.
Like you can see what's going on in different homes. I don't know if you watch this film Watcher, that or the Hitchcock film
Rear
Rear
Window.
Window.
Sure,
Yes, or
absolutely.
even Polanski films has that a lot, like the Tenant and Rosemary Baby, maybe not that much, but like there's this thing that of watching other people, and there's like this access of mirrors or like weird watching other people. I think that's
Yes.
also that is like a very good tool for films, I guess, but it's also very creepy in many sense, of course.
Yes. So getting to the sort of plot or general theme of your first feature, Huesera, which I guess translates to or is also called The Bone Woman. It's based on a Mexican like folk tale. So can you tell us a little bit more about that, the story, the inspiration?
Yes, it's a legend. It's not as known as, for example, La Llorona. It's a more like it's kind of like a tale that your grandmother tells you, but not everyone knows it, honestly. And I read about it like 10 years ago as well, and it stayed with me. Actually, in some of my bands I wrote some songs that were inspired on this legend. And it's because it tells a story of a elder woman that digs out bones in the desert and goes through a very long and sweating and painful process of putting together this skeleton throughout a long time. And then with the help of fire, she creates this ritual that gives life to this entity, to this creature, and sets it free. It's completely different from the film, but it speaks about finding those pieces of yourself that many times we don't want to look at or we are avoiding, and it speaks about like bones as a literal, like those profound areas of ourselves, like the deeper or like the most hidden parts. So I kept that, and I think it's a very good metaphor for doing any kind of therapy process, that you can do it through many ways. uh, and I also love the aspect of the bones because I thought it could be very cinematic,
Oh yeah.
in the sense of having a crack, or like it comes with a sound, it comes with an
Ooh.
image that creates a instinctual reaction on the audience.
And
So I
Have
thought
you,
it was perfect.
have you gotten enough the praise that you deserve for the audio in that movie? Because the cracking and the sort of that we ran a scene, we ran that eating scene with the spider before you came on, and all of that is it's so visceral, more so than in any movie I can think of that I've seen in quite some time. I don't know what you guys were doing audio wise, but it worked.
Thank you so much. Honestly, I think like I found that I'm a very sound focused director. Of course, I love image and I work a lot on the camera placement and all that, but I think like I obsess with sound. And even from the script, we think a lot about like what is gonna be told through sound. Like that, sometimes the frame can be empty and everything that's pushing the story it's outside of the frame, and you can just hear it. And I think those are very rich tools for filmmakers. Like I really feel like it's 50 and 50%.
Oh my God,
And
yeah.
and there's a lot that came from the script. So I had a lot of talks with my sound designer. His name is Christian Girau. He's super talented. So then we really worked out on having a great location recording sound. It was a team from Peru, because we had a Peruvian co-production, and actually Peruvian sound recorders are amazing. Like they had very good techniques of having two mic people on set all the time. It's like they really protect the sound. So most of the sound design was really based on our actual set recording, if that makes sense. Like
Oh
we
wow.
would like distort it, and we were really trying to work everything from not from libraries, not from drone sounds, not from outworld effects, but really the sound itself that was surrounding our character and distorting that, and that actually can become very creepy because it feels very real.
I love it. Well, when we were initially going to have you on, and thankfully we finally we made it happen. But I thought, as an ode to you, that opening song should be the Time Warp. Because I know you're a huge Rocky Horror Picture Show fan. You've seen them in a couple countries, the live versions. And I'll tell you, I was telling Joe this, like, have you ever considered, particularly with your punk background, have you ever considered doing a musical? Because when you think about it, there are certain aspects to successful horror filmmaking that actually lend themselves real well to a well-done musical.
Dramatic.
And there aren't many well-done musicals, but I feel like you have it in you.
Oh my God, I love that you say that. I really have that dream since I started.
Oh, really?
I mean, and not actually. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, like Rocky Horror really formed me, and not only Rocky Horror, like Velvet Goldmine and like
God,
old
yeah.
John Waters and like yeah. For example, I was listening the other day to the Cry Baby soundtrack or the Streets of Fire. Those kind of films I really love. I don't see myself really directing a film with like a song dialogue, you know.
Right.
But I love musical films. Like I love films like also Spike Lee has some of those films that suddenly turn musical. You know, like they have complete musical scenes, and that's something that I dream of doing. And I actually have one project that it's a musical project, and I actually want to. It's based in the U.S., so it's for the future, but it's more within the. It's like a thriller within the salsa dancing world. And that's something that I really have in mind.
That's a great idea. Oh, man. Thriller. She had me at Thriller and Salsa.
Oh my gosh, yes, because it's like a little, it's like sexy, but can turn scary very quickly. You know, there's that fine line between, the intensity, I think, is the same. In both.
Yeah, and actually, like salsa music, some of the lyrics, you would think that they're like speaking about like happy aspects of life, but some of the lyrics of salsa are like way much more darker than black metal or punk. You know, they really speak about human suffering and pain, and I don't know. There's something, and many of those songs tell you story. They are very narrative. Some salsa songs. So I think it's really a music, as you can see, that inspires me a lot for a future musical. So fingers crossed someday someone pays me to do that.
I like the way your brain works. Have you met Jordan Peele? I feel like you guys would have a lot to talk about. You're both upsetting formats that have been around a while in cool ways.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a huge fan. Like he's one of my biggest inspirations, but I haven't had the luck to meet him. But I love all of his work.
Well, you're a lot like him, where some of his most recent stuff, it's one of those things where, and it doesn't, mostly because I have a tiny brain, but it's one of those things where these days, if I see a film, that's it, in and out. Good or bad, I move on with my life and I don't think about it. But especially the Nope one, when I saw that, I was thinking about Nope for 3 weeks after the fact. And this film is exactly like that. It sticks with you, and that alone.
Oh my God, thank you.
Yeah, you guys got to chat. I think he would be a big fan of yours as well.
Wow, that means a lot.
So with a large theme of this movie is motherhood, is pregnancy, is the journey from conception to birth and how it changes a woman. I really like how it's also like some of the anxieties or, the mental aspect of becoming a mother and the changes that happen. I'm curious about culturally, if you have found that there's been a different reception to this film in Mexico versus the U.S., or do you think that regardless of culture and background, everyone can kind of relate on that level?
You know what? I was very lucky because I had the chance to travel a lot, like I've never done in my life before with this film. Like I went to Argentina and Peru and Korea and Sweden and Switzerland. It was crazy. Like I went to new places to share this film. And we started in Tribeca and in the US, and every place has been different. But what I do feel, there's a constant part of the audience that I feel like they're grateful. Like they're saying like, oh, finally, thank you for saying something that I feel like I can speak about in my everyday. and I do find those conversations. I found those conversations everywhere. And that really makes sense to the whole film. Of course, there's different reactions. The film was very well received in the US. Honestly, I made a little tour over there, different cities. Every screening was packed, and I feel like a great reaction from the audience in the US, especially also from many Latin American audiences. But I do have to say that in Mexico, it happened a weird thing because it's a small film. For us, it was a small film. It's a first feature for most of the people behind it. So we never thought we were gonna have such a huge release. In Mexico, we released in 1,200 screens.
Wow.
So it was all around the country, and we reached. Now it's still in cinemas, but we reached already like 800,000 spectators, which is
Wow.
huge
Yeah.
for a film, and it divided the people. It even became a huge discussions in Twitter, and like there's of course a part of the spectators that are conservative, especially regarding women's rights and bodies,
Right.
and that created very interesting conversations and polemic things with the film that honestly, of course, we knew since the beginning that we were doing an uncomfortable film, and I love to be uncomfortable. That's the kind of films that I like, but it exploded even more than I thought. But it's been great. I feel like it has opened conversations at homes and within people that are very necessary.
Well, what are your thoughts overall with regards to the miracle of childbirth? And again, less of a miracle and a little scarier in this film. But I say also because my little scamp of a co-host got recently married, and I wonder what her thoughts about possibly making a family were before and after this film as well. So I guess it's a question for both of you guys.
Well, you know what? Like honestly, like so many of the people involved in the film are parents. Like a huge part of the film, of course, were women, but most of them are moms. And honestly, it's not everything that the film talks about is nothing new for them.
Yes.
Like they actually feel represented. They're like, oh my god, finally, this is like being spoken more and more in films and media, because some of these emotions and feelings they have it, or they've had it. Of course, it's a horror film. We take it to the extreme, but it's not uncommon to have these processes. The thing is that they keep it in the closet. They're ashamed. They're judged by it. So I think it's great to put this, to give light to these kind of stories. I think it's more surprising for other people that haven't go through those processes than for them. For them, that's why I was saying that I feel a lot of gratefulness. No, yeah, gratefulness. Like I've had a lot of women like in their 50s, like that they have like grown up child and family approaching me to say thank you. And that's been really great, and they're not really the common audience for a horror film, so it's special.
Well, did it confirm all of your worries about?
Well, something I thought was very disturbing, which I think was meant to disturb me, was that the husband is a musician. And the wife, the main character, she is like a carpenter. She builds things. And in their home, they each have a room for their job/hobby. And she gets pregnant. Whose room is the first to go? Hers.
Yep.
They have to turn her workshop into the nursery. And I'm like, it can't be the husband's music room? Why does it have to be her room? He can play music anywhere. She needs a space to woodwork.
Totally. And the worst part of it is that she's part of that decision. And sometimes we, even ourselves, we assume that's how it had to be. Like, I have to take care of my body. I can't work with that kind of materials anymore. Like, that's a whole thing that justifies that part of sacrifice and loss of identity that comes with domesticity and motherhood, which, I mean, we have to talk about it, right? Like, I feel like there's so much, I had to do this project to understand so many of the aspects of my mom's life that I never looked at before. You know, like, oh my God, who was she before she become a mom, and how much she has to silence because it would be incorrect for her to say like, oh my God, I lost this aspect of my social life or of my world to have you. But
Yes.
we should be able to talk about that, no?
And that is one of the many themes in this thing is the what how childbirth kind of breaks you down and kills a version of yourself, and then another one comes from that, and that's very resonant. But I mean, and from you, because I'll tell you, I'm a lot older than both of you. A lot. But all my female friends that are my age, to a T, the ones that are still single, most of them have frozen their eggs. And I find it very interesting. They have done that, and it's expensive, and you don't know if it's the whole thing's a nightmare. I've learned through them. But almost to a T, most of them are like, okay, I did it, but I still don't think I really want kids. And I think that's sort of a relatively new development with my older generation, and certainly your guys. I mean, you specifically, do you think you'll ever want them? I mean, you never say never, of course, but
You know, like I really don't know. I feel like I would really love to be in that moment in life where that really becomes a question that I would consider.
Right.
Because I haven't reached that point. I don't see myself, at least now, as a mom, but I do wonder, you know, like, not because I did Huesera, it's not like I never want to. I feel like I wanted more to speak about how, like, we grow up in this system that tells you that there's one path to happiness. And any other paths are going to take you to this miserable solitude life, you know, like you're going to end up dying alone. And I feel like we have to challenge that because it's a very scary narrative, you know, like that force many women at the last minute to have kids because they're fearful of losing that, you know, and I feel like we need to ask ourselves if we need to reach that point, or we can be okay with not following that path and understanding that we can also be happy, and there's many other ways to build family and community.
Yeah, and it's like there's always that cliche fear, or maybe saying that every new parent has, like, you know, we don't care if it's a boy or a girl. We just want to make sure there's 10 fingers and 10 toes and everything's okay. But no one ever thinks about, okay, everything's okay. Their heads, they got a head on their shoulders, hands are okay, nothing mental going on. But what if they're just dicks? What if you just make a dick? And, like, you know, there's just people that are shitty. What if you make a shitty kid? That, like, no one talks about that enough.
As far as the egg fall from the tree, egg, apple, I don't know, mixing metaphors.
They're both round.
But speaking of fear, you know, there's also the other side of the coin, right? Some people can be fearful about not living the sort of assumed life, you know, the 2.5 kids, white picket fence. But often as artists, I'm an actress, my husband is an actor, you're fearful about almost living the generic life. Like you're fearful about how it could affect you as an artist if you do have kids versus if you don't. But then my husband said something really kind of thoughtful and possibly true, saying, what if having a kid can inform you even more as an artist? Like, what if the act of becoming a mother can open like doors, not doors, but like windows and like psyche and like kind of make you a more complete artist in a way.
This movie taught us open windows are not a good thing.
And I thought that was an interesting idea too. You know, I don't know that anything can ever just be black and white, a blessing or a burden. I think maybe it can be a mixture. And any life decision you make is going to inform you and the rest of your career or interests.
Of course, I mean, I agree. Honestly, I feel like there's many ways of parenting humans or other, like I do feel, for example, like that with my film. It took us 5 years to create this. I was a completely different person when I started doing Huesera, and there's some certain kind of attachment that, of course, is always going to be very different to another human being. But it opened different doors to me in my life. I got to meet amazing people or different parts of the world, and I feel like we can also assume those other pathways as rich, you know, and different, you know, and I don't feel like I feel like it's part of that violent narrative to say, like, what are you gonna lose
Yeah.
But you're always gonna lose in this
Sure.
life, yeah, right?
Yeah.
People will.
I'm already well. I've got enough of a background on that. I want to get used to winning. That's my very late New Year's goal.
That's very true. That's very true.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard you say that which obviously this movie addresses and then some, that the horrible term that is spinster is sort of more of a prevalent thing still in Mexico, and maybe perhaps a little less so in the States that this movie addresses.
Oh my God, it's very installed in Mexico. Every family, we have that concept of these spinster women, that it also has to do with what we're talking about. This concept that if a woman never became a mom or never built that kind of family, there's an assumption that she's unhappy and miserable and bitter. And that's very installed. And there's so many films and media in Mexico that have that portrayal of these kind of women that is, I think, is terrible. And it's part of what makes us so scared of not following those traditional pathways. And I think that we have to de-articulate. At least in my life, I have so many women, diverse women around me that have actual different pathways in their lives that are very inspiring, and they have very happy family, happy lives. Or even like there are women that are mothers, but they have like other kind of relationships with their families and their kids that are not the traditional ones. Like, for example, satellite moms do exist. Like the kind of concept that we have of these men that just come every weekend to visit their kids, and we assume that as normal. That can also happen with women, and
Sure.
There's such a diverse way to have like these kind of relationships with kids or with parenting. You can also be a parent by being an aunt. Mm-hmm. Or being a friend, or being, like I last week I was like in a meeting with these filmmakers. They are 21-year-olds, and they're very inspired by my film, and there's certain kind of wanting to protect them and giving them tools. Like there's so many ways that we can parent and that we can create collectiveness, that it doesn't have to be this path of a family home, nuclear family. And I think that's part of the conversation, that it shouldn't be black or white.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of children and parenting, we saw there are a few children in this film. Mm. I gotta know, directing children.
Oh, yeah.
Directing adults. Do you like working with kids on set? What do you find most challenging? And is it actually just the parents of the kids that are the most challenging? Because that's what I hear.
Yeah.
You know what? Actually, I love working with kids. And actually, a good thing to, like, interesting, how do you say, eggshell of the film is that the little girl in the medical lab, that's the main actress' daughter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's her. And it was so fun. She's so amazing to work with. And she's actually in the trailer, I know. Like, her image became very iconic. And the other kids were so fun to work with. And honestly, like, kids are sometimes more fun and easy to direct in the sense that they are playing. And for me, set and creating films had to do a lot with a game to play and have ideas and change for a new one, and don't be like locked in certain preconceptions. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think like some of the actors that are in the film, most of them are great, but that are like more like experienced and like like a lot of films behind, where it's sometimes even harder to direct.
Sure.
Because they have like a lot of structures, like what happened to adults, like that is very sad.
Yeah.
So no, it was very fun, like especially the niece and the nephew, that they seem to be terrible. They're the sweetest.
Mm-hmm.
And also the other thing I would notice is I love the dichotomy between the kind of clinical sex scene she initially has with her husband, and then they don't have sex because he's worried about, which I've heard from a lot of buddies of mine, that he doesn't want to hurt the baby or anything. Yeah. And then, without using too many adjectives, great scene with her and her ex-girlfriend. And I'm wondering, as a first-time director, well done on nailing a great love scene like that. But were you nervous? What are the ins and outs of that? I mean, those are tricky things to film.
Did you have like an intimacy coordinator on set?
Yeah.
Well, we don't have that figure yet in Mexico, which is really
Oh.
sad. I am the kind of director that I believe the most important thing in films are human relationships. So I build long relationships with my team and my cast. We work for months on the script. I let them bring ideas. We analyze the text. We rehearse like as much as we can. And I do worry a lot to protect them, my cast. Like I'm always aware if they're comfortable, if they're cold, if they're hungry. Like I'm trying to always be aware of how they're feeling, and I try to really protect the relationship. Yes, like a conversation that they can be open and tell me if they feel uncomfortable. And I think that's very important. Maybe one of the most important things of filmmaking, because at the end of the day, we're with them. Like everything can be falling apart, the lights can be perfect, but if they're not okay, the film is also not going to be okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like I build a lot those scenes from talking with them a long time before. A lot.
Right.
Like I do have a lot of conversation. I ask how are they comfortable. So then the moment that we are there, we like I always take almost everyone outside of the set, and I keep the less people possible to build an intimate atmosphere. But then I feel like we worked so much before, and we already became friends, that it was so fun. They were like, Michelle, like stop wearing, like let us play. We don't want to wear these weird songs. Like they were like just making fun, like jokes, and it was very fun. It was a very fun film to, fun scene to film. Because we built this intimate relationship between us before, and we talked a lot about it. So I think it's a very bad idea as a director to arrive to a set with a sex scene, for example, with having had a long development process before together, because it's their bodies and it's their intimacy. So there's have to be a whole process of consent going on there.
Well, yeah, and it's like you said, with the communication comes trust, right? And if everyone has the same goal, then you can kind of let all the heaviness go away. And like you said, you can just play with it and kind of enjoy yourselves.
Yeah. And honestly, like, of course, with the sex scenes, but with every scene, I always trying to protect them, because they're so vulnerable. Like, you're also an actress.
Yeah.
You're like, I am aware. Like I don't act, but I took some theater classes, and I understand just by little what it feels to be exposed that way, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm very aware of that, and I think it's part of my like number one priorities.
Sure.
I guess.
Well, you mentioned about how much of this has actually come from your background, whether it be the punk thing or even just going into the balcony issue. I'm wondering, have you ever had a long-term relationship with a guy and a woman comes back into your life a little bit like the main character did as well? Because that felt very based on something truer, perhaps.
No, you know what? No, that's really that, and her relationship with her whole pregnancy. I've never been pregnant. That was really for the character. In the terms of me, I guess like creating Huesera really helped me de-articulate my own sexuality, and it made me, because there's this concept about forced heterosexuality that many times we don't question. We assume that we are heterosexual, but why I never thought about that before. So I feel like that the film, in that sense, like the whole process of creating Huesera, made me understand many new things about myself that I didn't know before, which is wild.
Well, it was interesting, too, for me that it almost seemed as if the aunt, who is one of my favorite characters, her spinsterism, for the most part, there's one scene where there's people yelling out homophobic slurs to more her friend than her. But for the most part, it seems that her bisexuality was less of an issue than her aunt's spinsterdom and not having had kids or anything like that to begin with, almost.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like with the aunt, we wanted to. It has to do. It's also a generational thing,
Yeah.
of course. Yeah, but we also wanted to start with this cliche or stereotype of the spinster aunt, and then build like de-articulate that throughout the film, like transform that concept and reveal that she actually has a way much more rich life and intimacy that is not like the first reading of a character.
Forget about,
You
well,
know?
we could start getting into spoilers a little bit too, because we only got, unfortunately, about 10 minutes left. But you're so good at showing rather than telling. And there's like that one small scene where she's there with her friends, and we learn up that they do a lot of other interesting things together. But she's there with her friends, and they're just having a great time drinking beer at this outdoor festival. And she's watching that and being like, well, she doesn't seem that sad or lonely at all. She's got a pretty good life. And it's a very tiny scene, but it kind of says it all.
Yeah, I love it. It's one of my favorite moments of the film, to be
Yeah.
honest, because I feel like it encloses the whole thing that Valeria is trying to embrace
Yes.
throughout the
Yeah.
film. You know, at the end of the day, like those are the kind of apparently broken characters that are actually the most loving, you know, and that are on the other side, and they're gonna hold a character like Valeria.
They're the only ones I wanted to hang out with. Forget about the rest of the family. And by the way, as a male spinster myself, I appreciated this. Both my brothers have a bunch of kids, so it resonated with me.
I mean, speaking of those characters and these great moments, so much of that has to do with the casting. The casting of this film was
Yeah.
great. There truly was not a weak link. Everyone is so talented. The chemistry between all of the characters was so great. What is that casting process like? Do you use a lot of the same actors? Are these people you know? How involved are you in the casting process?
You know what? Actually, the casting director is one of the witches at
Oh,
at the cleansing scene, and I convinced her. She's a great actress, but she doesn't work anymore on that side. Because I thought she kind of represented to me what the witches represent for Valeria throughout the
sure.
film. You know, in the
Yeah.
process of creating my first film, because she was really invested, like from the most. Like from the most deep concepts and themes behind the film. So she worked from there. We really talked so much about each character, and we saw so many actors. And I am the kind of director that I believe a lot in casting. I think casting is
Oh,
gold,
yeah.
because I mean, you assume like all the actors that she's gonna call, we assume they're all great.
Yeah.
There's a reason why she's calling them. That's not the issue. It's like really what can these different actors can change or transform of the character that I had in my mind from the paper with my
Sure.
co-writer. But then it's when really a collaboration starts existing. You start seeing like, oh my God, I always thought of this character as having this age or being this gender or this race, but then so a completely different proposal arrives, and then it completely like changed the character and makes it way much more rich and even political, or even, like it opens other new conversations that I think are very creative and very enriching for films. So I love to see castings, and I get very involved, and I see every tape, and then I am presenting the callbacks, and I discuss a lot with my casting director, to the point that I made her part of the film as well.
Yeah,
And
I
she
love
brought,
that.
for example, most of the characters, but like the lead character is she arrived in the last minute, because we saw so many actresses, and she kept saying like, just wait for one more, like I have a gut feeling. And then Natalia arrived, so
She's
that's
unreal.
why it's also, yeah, she's
so great.
magnetic, and it's her first feature
Well,
as a
and
lead.
that's wild to me, because
Yeah.
like I could see her blowing up.
Yeah,
Like
oh,
I
yeah.
could see that. It's so hard to do horror without and having it be grounded and be so real and not over the top. And she does a really great job. Last thing I just want to say, there were two moments that really reminded me of Rosemary's Baby, which are just like really nice little nuggets. The first, when she's actually losing weight and not gaining weight.
Oh, yeah.
And then later, when there's a dinner party and the couple comes over, they're like, let's open this bottle of wine. And it just those two moments reminded me of that film. And I don't know if that was intentional, but it's just nice for people who do like the genre. There are some moments, which is cool.
Of course, there's a lot of like Easter eggs. And
Easter
actually,
eggs,
in
yeah.
that dinner, I don't know if you remember that she has this collar, this necklace that is like the same necklace as Rosemary Baby.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Good
yeah.
call.
Yeah, I just have to say that I love Rosemary Babies. It's one of my big influences, of course. But if you see, the film basically says that it doesn't matter if you were attacked by the devil,
Yeah.
sexually attacked by the devil, and like your kid is a devil itself. You're always gonna have a maternal instinct coming out, and you're gonna
Sure.
want him to stay, you know. And we were like, actually,
Yeah.
no. Yeah.
Wow. Well, we knew you back when, because I see a lot more interesting stuff coming from you in the future. Well, thank you so much.
Yes,
Anything
thank
else you
you.
want to plug, promote before we let you go?
Well, just like please go watch the film. It's in VOD. It's also gonna be soon on Shudder,
Okay.
available on Shudder. So yeah, thank you so much for this space
Thanks
to
so much,
invite more people to
Michelle.
watch it.
Yes.
Thank you. That
Thank
was
you for your
great.
time.
Thanks to you. Thanks to you. I love talking to you. Good morning. I love meeting you as well.
Oh,
Thank you so much.